Hello again, everybody. It's time for Coco and Dolls. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dolls.
And this week we are going to talk about some crazy stuff. We're going to talk about movies that we went to see today. So we went to the movie theater today. We saw two movies.
We did.
We saw The Post and we saw The Last Jedi.
Kind of radically different demographics involved there.
And we might not have paid for both.
But we're white people in New England, so we're probably not going to get popped for that.
So we were good. We were all good.
Yeah.
So first of all, let's talk about The Last Jedi, Coco. Because
we're talking about that one first?
Let's talk about that one first,
Okay.
because that was the one we most recently saw.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on this fine cinema film?
Yeah, I didn't love it.
Really?
What are your thoughts about it?
Well, I need more. Why didn't you love it?
Well, I said right after the movie that it's easy to write a beginning and it's easy to write an end, but the middle can be a little bit tougher, and I think that's kind of what this movie suffered from. Like, how are they going to bridge from The Force Awakens to whatever the name of the last movie in this trilogy is going to be, which I don't even know if they've released that, but yeah, so I didn't love it.
You didn't love it?
No.
It did, to me, sort of feel like a bridge movie, between beginning and end. Definitely felt like it was a stopgap movie and didn't, the characters were familiar to us, so there wasn't a lot of who's that guy and is he good or is he bad? I mean, there was a couple of new characters, but it wasn't really like the first one where we were learning all this for the first time.
Mm-hmm. And I did read that a lot of the fans were really upset with like the witty, quips and stuff in there. But I felt like there weren't as many witty quips as in The Force Awakens. I actually liked The Force Awakens, unlike
somebody in this room who thought it was a remake of A New Hope, Star Wars, the one made in 1977, whatever they're calling it.
Right, yeah, I understand where you're coming from with that, but I liked it. I thought it was entertaining and enjoyable, and it just felt lighter and funnier than this one, and I understand to a certain extent why that is, but I just, specifically as to the wisecracks, I didn't think there were nearly as many as the first one.
Well, I can see why people would think that, because in the beginning of the movie, and not spoiling anything here, I don't believe, but when Poe Dameron is trying to contact the bridge of the big fancy, what was it called? Dreadnought. Yes. He was trying to contact the leader, and he did this whole back and forth like he was on hold, and he couldn't. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? And like that kind of thing. And it was very un-Star Wars like. I don't think Darth Vader would have put up with that.
That seemed a little forced.
It seemed a little weird, and it seemed like out of place for that franchise. It seemed like it would be better for a different kind of franchise. But so I can see the point of view of the fans saying it was too light. There was too many Arnold Schwarzenegger wisecracks in the movie. So I can see that. The other thing that I thought about the movie as I was watching this, and it occurred to me about the whole franchise, and I hope I'm not doing anything outrageous in terms of the fans and that sort of thing, but whenever you see the scene, so there's a scene in this movie which is very similar to other movies where they had in the cantina, and they have other scenes where there's all these foreign creatures from all these different worlds around the universe. It occurred to me you never see two of the same kind of creature. So how do they procreate? How do they, is there some sort of, it can't be just the same thing for all species. So some of them have got to have mates and stuff like that. So that was what I took out of this movie, out of The Last Jedi.
Wow.
It's like, where are all the partners for these?
Right. Where's the intergalactic Noah's Ark of
right.
Yeah.
Two of each. I mean, there was only one of each. And so that kind of distracted me, I have to say, for the 2.5 hour running time. The other thing that distracted me for the 2.5 hour running time, I'm not sure. This is theater etiquette, people. 2 rows ahead of us.
Right.
Did this bother you too? You saw that.
Yeah, it did. It was a little distracting, yeah.
Yeah, there was a family there, a young family, had a lot of kids, and one of the kids was playing a video game on a phone the entire time through the entire movie, and that annoyed the baffle garb out of me.
Baffle garb.
I don't know if maybe that's a an intergalactic swear word. But I didn't. So movie theater etiquette.
Right.
Don't have your phone on.
It's one thing if somebody like flips the phone up once because they got like a text or something, but
checking the time or
the
something
kid's
like that.
just playing like Donkey Kong, like the whole movie.
Right, right. And so here's the thing about The Last Jedi. It's a very dark movie, so it's in space. There's not a lot of light, so the theater is dark.
Right, they're not on Jakku. It's not well lit.
Right,
you know?
Right. So they're not. Yes, exactly. So therefore, the theater is dark. And unless you're sitting 2 rows behind somebody who's playing a video game on their phone.
Somebody who decided to save $20 and not hire a babysitter so they could
That's
go
precisely what it was. And they got up and down about 17 times during the movie.
They did, yeah.
I mean, again, I don't want to criticize. I've been to movie theaters with little kids. I know how it works. But don't give them a phone in the movie theater.
Right. And this is not a little kid movie. Like, if you're going to take your kids to the movie, take them to Coco.
Right.
Don't take them to
Trolls or something more appropriate for them. Exactly.
Right.
So
not The Last Jedi.
That was distracting. And while we're on movie theater etiquette, because this is a complete tangent, if you're going to the movie, try not to snore as the man beside me was doing a couple of seats down. Did you hear that?
I heard that, and the people in front of us heard that too.
And they looked around.
Looking around.
There was one quiet moment, one serious, deep moment in the movie, and there was snoring going on.
That should tell you how good, I'm using air quotes you can't see, The Last Jedi is when somebody is actually falling asleep during a Star Wars movie.
So here we are. This is the roundup of what we just talked about. This movie is so good. Kids were playing video games, and grown men were snoring.
Snoring, yeah. Yeah, I work with a guy who had told me that he didn't like it, but he also didn't like The Force Awakens, which, like I said, I enjoyed. And he loved Rogue One, which I also enjoyed. So I was like, okay, I'll probably be somewhere in the middle. Like, I'll like it, but I won't love it. And then I didn't.
You didn't like it?
I don't necessarily have to watch it again.
Yeah.
But maybe it might turn into a thing where on the second viewing, I like it better. Like, because there are times that happens on second viewing or on second read. Like, my favorite book, the first time I read it, after the first chapter, I put it down.
Oh, yeah?
And I didn't go back to it for a month.
And what book was that?
The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood.
Oh, Margaret Atwood.
And
well, that's a segment for another podcast.
Right. But then I got to the end of it, and I was so blown away, I had to go back and reread it again from the beginning. And the second time, I was like, this book is fantastic.
Yeah,
so maybe it would be a thing like that, but...
I doubt it. I think you're being generous because that's the kind of person you are, Coco. You're kind and thoughtful and generous. I think the movie was a mess in a lot of ways to me because there wasn't a streamlined story. Like the first one, at least I got the story.
Right.
The second one was like, what are they trying to say? What are they doing here? What is there any sort of allegory that I'm missing? It was hard to figure out what it was all about. And it was kind of the same as the first one in that the bad guys are chasing the good guys and they're catching up to them. And but the good guys have got some sort of secret weapon, and it smacked me of the same, sort of like a lot of the same.
Yeah, I think the best thing about it is those little furry things on Luke's water planet where the Jedi temple was. What are those called? Porgs or something?
Is that what they were? Yeah.
Yeah.
The crystal guys? The crystal dogs? The guy. Oh,
yeah.
The thing that Chewie was going to eat over the campfire. Right. Totally. One of those guys.
Yeah. Those were probably the best thing about the movie for me.
So to me, that was one of the worst things because it was like the Ewoks of the
yeah.
new movie. It was like every movie's got to have an Ewok equivalent so that all the kids can have collectibles at Christmas.
Well, okay. All right. Then another thing that I did enjoy about the movie was when they were on the weird casino planet.
Yeah.
And Rose and Finn freed the horse-dog hybrid thing. Yep. I'm like, wow, an animal rights statement in the middle of The Last Jedi. Because Finn had said something to the effect of like, this is why we came here, and then Rose actually freed the animal, and then she said, no, this is why we came here, or something to that effect.
That was a statement,
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, all right.
I like that. I like
sympathy for all creatures. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So. On the casino planet that had one of every species on it, and there were no mates on that planet. Nobody was having fun on that planet.
Well, maybe they were, and maybe that's why there's so many weird looking things in the
Oh,
galaxy.
that could be.
Yeah,
it could be like the whole Spock kissing a green lady thing on not Spock, sorry, Captain James T. Kirk on the first Star Trek. The interspecies kiss that we had on that one.
Yeah, maybe. So maybe that's like a whole subtext, like that we like diversity is good.
Well, maybe
that's what the filmmakers are saying, because there's obviously more diversity
in outer space.
In terms of the casting, like you've got black people and white people and Asians and people Latino descent and all the bad people are white guys.
Pasty white guys with English accents.
Exactly.
Did you notice that? They're mostly English accent guys. Yeah, and I don't know if anybody, and if any of the Anglos are upset about this. Is there an Anglo group that's probably up in arms about this?
I bet we could probably find a Facebook page about that.
We probably could. Anglos against Star Trek. No, that's Star Wars. What was that? That's A.
Anglos against... Awesome. Yeah.
Aswa.
I don't know.
Yeah, all right. So the other movie we saw today was
The Post.
And what did you think, Coco, of The Post?
I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, actually. Not that I thought that it was going to suck, but they managed to make it suspenseful when everybody... At least if they don't know the full detailed history, they know the general gist of it.
So tell the listeners, our many, many, many listeners who are out there right now.
Drunken Swedish listener.
Right, the one guy who's left, who hasn't seen The Post, doesn't know what it's about. Tell them what it's about.
I think you're better at recapping, so why don't you do that?
So it's about the Pentagon Papers and the idea of what happened with the president's up to and including Nixon and their stance on the Vietnam War and why it was not a good experience and the spin, essentially, that they should put politically on it to the public to say this is why we're in the war. And it was essentially lying by presidents before it became fashionable.
What? Presidents lie? What?
I know, it's crazy.
What?
This is a movie for the times. I don't think, and Steven Spielberg directed it. Meryl Streep is in it. Tom Hanks is in it. Bob Odenkirk. No, sorry.
That sounds right.
David Cross. A lot of really good actors in this movie.
Matthew Rhys, who is in The Americans, which I have not seen but have heard good things about. And I also saw him, and he was Mr. Darcy in some kind of weird Pride and Prejudice sequel. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the BBC or ITV or somebody did, and I watched it, and it was called Death Comes to Pemberley. I remember
that. Look at this.
I know, right?
This is a tangent that we did not rehearse this.
And I'm the one person who watched Death Comes to Pemberley.
Wow.
So I remember that.
I stand corrected as Bob Odenkirk. I should have known that.
Oh.
Bob Odenkirk of Better Call Saul.
Oh, that's what you said, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. Exactly and people will not rewind the podcast to double check that.
Our single drunken Swedish listener might not even speak English, so he might not be able to distinguish.
That's a very good point. So all advertising in the future should be in Swedish.
Speaking of advertising, we are accepting sponsors. So if anybody who has money would like to give us some because you are looking for the drunken Swede demographic to appeal to. Any alcohol companies, perhaps, would like to give us money and free booze?
We also take free products.
We do. I will sell the hell out of your product, especially if it is alcoholic in nature.
So returning to The Post, which is the movie that we saw today.
And we are whoring ourselves out for money, which is totally against all journalistic ethics and standards.
So the movie, to me, I don't think that I'm spoiling anything here. Tom Hanks is Ben Bradley. I watched a documentary on the life of Ben Bradley not all that long ago, who was the big editor-cheese, I think that was his title actually, editor-cheese, at the Washington Post during the whole Pentagon Papers and the Watergate scandal and everything like that ensued. Tom Hanks, I thought, well, originally what I said to you was, when this movie came out, I said, this looks like a good movie to watch on Netflix.
Exactly. You said you did not buy Tom Hanks as Ben Bradley.
I did not buy Tom Hanks as Ben Bradley because I had seen, obviously, I had seen All the President's Men. Jason Robards played that part and played it very, very well. And so that's an iconic kind of part, and you don't want to compete with that. And then, of course, I saw the documentary on Ben Bradley, so I saw the real Ben Bradley talk. Ben Bradley narrated this documentary. He died 2014, I believe. And so I was having a tough time imagining Tom Hanks, because Tom Hanks to me is the guy from Bosom Buddies. That's how old I am.
Oh man!
When him and Peter Scolari were in Bosom Buddies, dressing up as women. Ever since then, Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, Tom Hanks in Apollo 13, Sully. He's still the guy from Bosom Buddies. Not denigrating his acting skill, because I think he's a fantastic actor, obviously. But I was having a hard time believing that he would be Ben Bradley, because it's an actor playing a journalist, and it's an actor who everybody knows is an actor. You look up and you see Tom Hanks. It's sort of like Tom Cruise or somebody else who's really
Clooney.
Right. It's like there's the actor right up there on the screen, and you know who that is. And no matter what kind of prosthetics they put on or what accent they try to put on, it's still the actor. And so, having said all that, I think that he was really good in this, and I got caught up in the story. I got caught up in the narrative.
This is how nerdy I am. Like, The Post gave me chills. The Last Jedi did not.
Oh.
Like, The Post actually, like when you're waiting on the Supreme Court decision.
Yeah.
Or like, the source comes through with like 4,000 of the pages. Like, I'm actually getting chills in the theater. I'm so excited. And then The Last Jedi, I was like, yeah.
So here's what we're going to do with movie ratings then. Siskel and Ebert had thumbs up and thumbs down. We could do like the Coco Chillometer.
I could actually
it'll be like Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Goosebumps-o-meter.
Right. Two arms of Goosebumps.
Two arms of Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we could do that.
One forearm of Goosebumps. Yeah.
What did you think of Meryl Streep's portrayal as Katharine Graham in the movie? So Katharine Graham is the owner of the newspaper, inherited it. Her husband committed suicide, so she inherited the role of the manager of the company. What did you think of her portrayal in that role?
Well, I mean, she's Meryl Streep. She's a goddess. Like,
she can do no wrong.
Yeah, she can do no wrong. And the scenes of her and Tom Hanks together, those are just like acting master classes.
Right.
Because they're just so effortless.
Right.
Like, they're both so good.
Yeah, they were.
Like, there was one scene, like, right at the beginning of the movie with just the two of them. And, like, 10 minutes into The Last Jedi, I was like, yeah, I don't know about this. But 10 minutes into The Post, I'm like, man, this is how it's done. Like, these two are just legends. Like, it's amazing. And so I will just come right out and say it unabashedly. I am a feminist, and I thought that they were a little bit heavy-handed with, at the end, like, so they're walking down the stairs of the Supreme Court, after the arguments, and there's all these young girls, like, looking at Meryl Streep as Katharine Graham, like, walking down the steps and, just admiration. And I thought they were, like, a little bit heavy-handed with that. But on the other hand, I mean, it was the 70s.
Yeah.
And I understand you had to see her as the only woman in the boardroom with 30 middle-aged old white guys because that's how it was then. And in many ways, that's how it still is now. So
well, in a lot of the places in that movie. So my take on her role was it was a very brave role for her to take on, because Katharine Graham was portrayed as not very competent for a lot of the movie.
Exactly. She was I don't know a whole lot about her, but she's legendary.
Right.
Like Katharine Graham, she's legendary. And she was so meek and timid for so much of the movie. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's exactly. I was thinking that through the whole movie up until the turning point where she makes the big key decision. And we're not going to spoil it for you. Of course, you know how it turned out, but we're still not going to spoil it for you. But
I think the Pentagon Papers tends to get overlooked in history classes for Watergate.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll just say that. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But
sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. My thought on that was it was brave because she was not a strong woman in that movie for a large part of that movie.
Right.
And she was reinforcing a lot of the stereotypes and a lot of the ideas that men had about women in those days. She was wishy-washy. She couldn't make a decision on her own. Mm-hmm. She was constantly talking to Fritz about things. She couldn't do it on her own. Right. And then she develops, and then she gets confidence. And it's a very pivotal moment to me when you were talking about her walking down the steps of the Supreme Court after the ruling and the women are all looking at her. I have two daughters. I got choked up during that moment because I was like, we needed the Catherine Grahams of this world
Right. Mm-hmm.
to show that there's equality out there. And then women, can make these big decisions on their own. They don't need men to hold their hands.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a real, that was the payoff point for me. It was like, I forgave the rest of the movie before that because I was getting a little bit torqued off as a dad of daughters. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you portraying her as such a ninny? Like, she's not, she was a very powerful woman in those days and, you know, very, the Washington Post was not what it is now today, but it was still a big, important paper in a very important city. Obviously, the politicians were reading it and everything like that. So once it got to that moment, to me, that was, okay, that makes it all worthwhile because she stood up and she made a decision and everything like that.
Yeah.
But
and I understood the symbolism of her walking down the steps and like all the young girls looking at her with admiration. But I thought
it was a little obvious.
Yeah, it was very obvious. Like I said, it was heavy-handed.
It was heavy-handed. Yeah, but so was the. I don't know if you noticed this or not, but in some of the scenes where you were talking earlier about her being the only woman in the boardroom with the men, all the men had dark suits on. They had very understated ties and white. I mean, that was sort of the garb of the day anyway. But she was always dressed in colorful. Like she stood out, in other words, and more than just. She was a woman in a room full of men, but she was also dressed colorfully too. And that to me was, okay, I get it. Like you didn't have to reinforce that with me. I understood that she was the different person in that room, but it was further reinforcement of
and then
all this.
When she makes the key decision to which Dolph's referred a few moments ago, she's wearing this like white, angelic, moo-moo, you know?
Right. And it was very,
very obvious.
Very obvious. And so there was, I noticed in that scene that we were talking about where she was either going to bed or getting ready for bed, and that scene in her own home where all the men come to talk to her about this crazy decision, what's she going to do, and some of them are trying to talk her out of it, and Ben Bradley's trying to talk her into what I think was the right thing to do. I mean, history obviously helps me be right about that. You know, I can say whatever I want, but it was history. I noticed that the scene there too was all the guys who were sort of against her all had their suit jackets on. Ben Bradley didn't have his suit jacket on. He had his sleeves rolled up, and he still has tie on and his shirt sleeves, his shirt on. But
I hope he's got a shirt on. Like,
there's one scene in The Last Jedi where there's no shirt, and that was I don't know why that was in there. But anyway, so The Post was a very good movie. So to me, the high watermark on that obviously is All the President's Men, which we're going to see on HBO, and then it disappeared from HBO for some reason, so we're going to try to watch that again.
Yeah, have to get that from the library or something.
And Spotlight, which we talked about in one of our previous podcasts, and how awesome it is, and how I watch it repeatedly when you're at work and I'm at home pretending to work. Watch scenes from that, and so I thought it was. I still love Spotlight because it was. I didn't know anything about that story before I watched the movie. Obviously, I knew a lot about the Pentagon, not a lot, but I knew about the Pentagon Papers and I knew about Watergate before I went to see The Post. So it wasn't as revelatory as Spotlight. And Spotlight is just good old-fashioned journalism that took place in more recently than the Pentagon Papers and the Nixon stuff. So it's hard to match that because it had more relevance and more context for me in today's society. But The Post surprised me. I was impressed.
I got chills at the end when they're laying out the front page and they're just waiting on the decision, and then the front page goes to press and like you see all the little blocks of type and everything like going in
the way they used to do it.
Yeah, right before everything got digitized, and I got chills.
Yeah. So that was a good one. The Post was good, and The Last Jedi was not as good. How many? So on a Goosebumps level, on a scale of 1 to 10 Goosebumps.
All right. Well, if we're going by letter grades, I would give The Last Jedi like a C.
No, 1 to 10.
1 to 10.
1 to 10 Goosebumps.
1 to 10 Goosebumps for The Last Jedi. I'd say
10 being thriller.
10 being like Rey in The Last Jedi, like being like violated by Snoke or whatever, where she's on her back up in the air, like screaming.
10 being like the air conditioning in the movie theater near the end of The Last Jedi that we were at.
Why did they blast it? It's January.
It was only, 18 degrees?
Outside. I was like, who turned on the AC?
Somebody opened a door or something.
Right.
I think
they're burning the popcorn or something. Like, I don't know.
Did you give us a number?
Oh, I didn't.
So The Last Jedi, 1 out of 10.
5.
What would you give the previous Star Wars movie?
You don't even know the name of it.
I don't care.
The Force Awakens.
The Force Awakens. Thank you.
I would give like an 8 or a 9.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So what would you give The Post?
I would also give that an 8 or a 9.
So The Post, I would probably give a 7. I'm a hard marker, so probably a 7. The Last Jedi, I would give a 5. I would agree with you on The Last Jedi with a 5. Right. It was a good action flick. It was a good science fiction movie, but it just I didn't come away with, like, at least I had some sort of thought about the previous Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens. I had a dominant thought about that it was a remake, but at least it was, it was a female lead, and it was an African American guy, and it was, there was a lot of really good stuff. And then Poe Dameron was kind of like Han Solo wannabe, and so there was some likable things about, and they were all new characters, like I said earlier. But this one,
I will say that my overwhelming thought on that is, and this is completely irrelevant to everything, but I still want them to kind of get like Rey and Finn together.
Oh, yeah?
And it kind of looked like maybe at the end they were going to get Finn and Rose together, and then maybe Rey and Poe together. And Poe is a handsome man, don't get me wrong. But I like the Rey and the Finn chemistry, so I'm rooting for that if we have to ship anybody in the new trilogy. You were laughing at me for my use of ship. That's the actual term.
Finn came very close to a very key moment in that movie. I guess I shouldn't say anything in case people want to see it, but
that movie's been out for like 6 weeks now, so I highly doubt we got any spoilers for anybody.
Yeah, how many spoilers are there really?
Exactly.
And so the surprise to me also when we went to the movie theater that shall remain nameless so they don't track us double dipping was that the theater for the paper. The Post. I keep saying the paper, not the Michael Keaton movie, but the Post. The theater was pretty packed.
It was. I think probably the theater for the Post was more packed than the theater for The Last Jedi.
Which I was not expecting. I was expecting it to be the other way around.
Yeah, definitely me too. Because we talked about that, like 4:15 showing of The Last Jedi on a Saturday. Maybe it might be a little. Yeah, we might not be able to find a seat, but. No, we got right in. I was really surprised.
So the moral of that story is that people still love journalism. I think.
Everybody wants to go see journalism movies.
Yeah.
As directed by Steven Spielberg.
I think maybe the next one will be on, like, agate and the history of agate. And for those who were born before 1980, we'll get that joke.
I used to do agate in a past life.
So did I.
I didn't mind it, actually.
We used to call ourselves agateers.
Nice.
So we would, when I was working at the newspaper, a large newspaper in Toronto, we would do the agate, and that was my first job out of journalism school, was being an agateer.
Did you have like an agate specialty, like the golf agate, or?
No, I was just all sports.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all sports. But I had a line gauge. Remember did you ever have line gauges?
No.
Okay, this is not. We're boring our one Swedish listener out there right now.
Yeah, right. I just remember pica rulers.
That's what it was.
Oh, it's a pica ruler.
Yeah,
okay.
same thing.
All right.
Same idea.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the wheel, do you remember the wheel where you had to try to get the dimensions and the measurements aligned and everything like that?
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah, neither do I. But those are old in newspaper days. So the Post was a throwback to that because they were putting all the lead. They used to have to set everything differently to print the pages and that sort of thing with the actual punching out of lead letters and things like that. That was really cool.
At one point, the Pentagon Papers source guy had his typewriter with him, and Dalt made a crack about that being his laptop.
It was the size of this dining room table that we're sitting at right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Probably weighed 5 times as much too. Because typewriters are heavy, man.
So Steven Spielberg, we talked a lot about him before we went to see this movie and all the fantastic movies that he's made over the years.
We did. We just watched Jaws last night. One of my 2, if not 3, favorite movies of all time.
So that's a very good segue to perhaps something we'll do every week or every other week or every other podcast.
If people will pay us money for it.
If people will pay us money for it. So the throwback movie that we did was Jaws. And I think that was the first time I had seen Jaws uncensored, front to back, without commercials or anything like that. Like just as I never saw it in the theater. I was way too young.
Not as young as I was when I first saw that movie, let me tell you.
And I really liked it. Robert Shaw, who played Quint, the gnarled,
crazy old
fisherman guy. Just fantastic. What an iconic role that is. That's nothing that we're saying that. And I'm not saying that, and people are going, "Oh wow, really?" Like that's a fact out there.
What is this Jaws movie you're talking
exactly. About? What? Who is that about? A guy with a big mouth. So
the Bond villain.
It's a Bond villain. It's a documentary on a Bond villain.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. So, what did you think upon seeing that after so many years of? I mean, I know it's a favorite of yours, but
it is a favorite of mine. I mean, I still love it. I'll watch Jaws. It used to come on like TNT or something constantly. Like they used to play it all the time, and I would always sit down and watch it, or I'd have it on in the background while I was folding laundry or something, and I will still watch it to this day. Anytime. Roy Scheider, who played Chief Brody, was actually one of my very first crushes.
Oh yeah,
I mentioned that last night, but yeah, because
also in Cabaret, was he not?
Was he?
I think so.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
I know he was in a Sequest, that horrible late 80s series. I know that, but that's the only other thing I know.
He was good in that. He played a pretty good police chief, right, of Amity.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was not the movie you referenced, the Jaws I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He was good. I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was a good journey. It was a good story.
Yeah, definitely. It's when, spoiler alert, Quint gets eaten by the shark at the end. That is definitely pretty graphic.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I watched that, and the blood is very red.
Yeah.
More so than real blood, but it still was like, that was gruesome.
Yeah.
That was some serious gruesome.
Well, I mentioned last night that, I watched the E! True Hollywood Story on the making of Jaws way back in the day, and they said that Spielberg intentionally did not use much red in the rest of the movie, so that whenever people got attacked, and then at the end when, spoiler alert, shark blows up, if anybody seriously emails us about
you spoiled Jaws for me.
You've had 40 years, bro. The
movie's been out since 1975. I was gonna see it.
Yeah, it's on my watch list. To make all the blood from the attacks and then from the shark blowing up that much more, to make it pop more.
Yeah.
Because it's not we saw all these little red Corvettes driving around Amity. Oh, okay, whatever, blood, big deal.
No red shirts or no red bathing suits or anything like that.
No red lifeguard uniforms. So.
That's good. That's good stuff.
That's good filmmaking tips right there.
That's solid.
That's why he's a legendary director.
And so that was his, we researched that. Our crack research staff handed us a big stack of papers and said, here, learn all this before the podcast. So we learned a couple of things. And one of them was that was his first big movie. He had made a movie before that, but that was the first bananas, crazy, awesome movie. And then he went on to be making
Spielberg.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. and then Raiders of the Lost Ark and then just
Schindler's List.
Can you believe the movies this guy has made? Whether you're a fan of his or not, just unbelievable. I mean, that's, again, stating the obvious that Steven Spielberg is a very good director. But when you look back at the movies that he's made, it's just unbelievable. Sort of we were talking about Ron Howard.
Exactly.
Reference to an earlier podcast.
So what are we doing with the Spielberg stuff? Are we going to say, where does the post stack up to Jaws, or is that what we're...
Well, yes. So do we want to do a versus... so a new segment that we can come up with in order to sell to potential subscribers and sponsors, I should say.
Yes.
And this was suggested by dedicated listener Scotty P., that we do a segment called Versus. And it's not a Pearl Jam album for the 4 people who might get that reference.
And not that old cable sports station.
Oh, that turned into...
NBC Sports?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
Or the outdoor...
See, that's a better joke than the one I made.
No, I don't think so.
Because the one I made is Pearl Jam. People are like, Pearl Jam? Who's that?
Pearl Jam is hip with people who grew up in the 90s, man.
Swedish fans?
Yeah, I bet Swedish fans like Jeremy. I don't know. I don't know. I was trying to think of like a Pearl Jam song, and that's what I came up with.
So Pearl Jam, just as a...
Better Man. I like that song.
It's the guy who's a really big... Eddie Vedder is a really big Chicago Cubs fan, so maybe people will resonate with that.
Oh, I can't be down with Eddie Vedder then.
So Pearl Jam... Oh, no, let's move on.
Okay. Let's not get sidetracked.
I was going to go on a major tangent there.
We have to appeal to sponsors, and if they think that we can't stay on track, then...
And then we need a theme for this. So
Right.
Versus... We're on to Versus!
Speaking of being hip.
Well, I can't do anything that we have to pay rights for.
Oh, that's
so
true, yeah.
I'm just going to make something up.
Yeah, okay.
So do we want to do Jaws versus The Post, or do we want to do early Spielberg versus later Spielberg? Do we want to do Star Wars versus Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Or...
I've never seen Close Encounters. So
no, neither have I, so we can't really
so
do
we
that.
Can't. We'll just be talking out of our asses there.
Which was different from the rest of the podcast.
One of us hasn't been drinking. That's all I'm going to say. So.
Wait a minute. I just got called out on the podcast.
Well, okay, let's not get into that. So,
okay, Versus. What do we want to do versus?
I don't know. Do we want to do, like, how about, like, all of the Spielberg, like,
the oeuvre?
Yeah.
So, the adventure oeuvre versus the
drama,
serious Schindler's List, Color Purple, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
So, what do you prefer? What do you think is better? Now, taking Spielberg's name off them and saying, what is the better movie? What is the more entertaining movie? What is what should people be more cognizant of?
Well, I would say that the movies that I have enjoyed have been, and this is going to be no surprise to you, the action adventure movies like Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I mean, don't get me wrong, Schindler's List, Oscar winner, The Post, very good. I didn't love Bridge of Spies. Like, it just kind of...
Didn't do it for you?
Yeah, it was just okay for me, even though Mark Rylance won Best Supporting Actor for that. Lincoln, yes, that just got pointed out to me. Very, very good movie.
By our crack
research staff. I did enjoy Lincoln very much, but if I were going to go back and rewatch movies, it's going to be Jaws every time.
So I guess the question is, what are the more influential movies? Spielberg's popcorn movies or his Oscar-worthy movies?
I'm going to say the popcorn movies.
So you think that changed the game more than the other movies?
I'm going to say so, yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I did not see Schindler's List. I'm the only person in the United States who has not seen that movie. But Raiders of the Lost Ark changed my life in a lot of ways because it was just... Everybody knows the melty Nazi face guy.
And I'm going to go back to The Post and say that the guy who played Bob McNamara...
Bruce Greenwood. ...
was totally a dead ringer, no pun intended, for the melty Nazi face guy.
He was,
in
actually.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
He was,
I didn't even realize that was Bruce Greenwood. Like, that's how...
Bruce Greenwood, by the way, is a fantastic actor. And I'm not saying that just because he's Canadian. He
Very
was
good.
Really good in that.
Very good also in American Crime Story, The People versus O.J. Simpson.
Right, and the role that he played in that was...
Gil Garcetti,
right.
L.A.A.D.
He was fantastic in that.
No, D.A., not A.D.
A.D.?
Like I said, only one of us has been drinking tonight.
You'll never guess who. Jurassic Park changed the game in a lot of ways. It gave Jeff Goldblum a really good career boost.
Yeah.
That was not an original, obviously a Michael Crichton idea from a book. It wasn't an original, but also E.T. Now, where would we put E.T. on this oeuvre?
You're going to mock me for my use of that word, aren't you?
Maybe. Constantly.
Yeah. Great. I don't know.
It was a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
It came out the same year as Blade Runner came out. And so being a contrarian, a practicing contrarian, I was all over the Blade Runner and not into E.T., which set like $zillion records. Mm-hmm. But it was still a really good movie. I haven't seen it in years. I probably should watch it with my daughters because that would be a good movie to see.
I'd watch it again. I haven't probably seen it since it came out.
But
I saw it in the theater. That's
Wow.
yeah. Even though I'm only 29 years old.
I was going to say you were underage in those
Yeah.
days. Saving Private Ryan, Close Encounters, Lincoln, Artificial Intelligence,
That was awful.
Minority Report.
I haven't seen that.
That was a great movie. Also a Philip K. Dick book turned into a movie. A fantastic job there. I like Tom Cruise in that. He was actually pretty good in that. The Color Purple we mentioned. Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah, I didn't love that.
Munich. I thought Munich was pretty
I
good.
never saw that.
War of the Worlds I did not see. Empire of the Sun.
Empire of the Sun is a great movie. Also a great book by J.G. Ballard. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it, although I like J.G. Ballard as an author, so I'm going to recommend that.
Where do you think 1941 ranks on the Steven Spielberg ranker?
I don't believe I've ever heard of 1941.
That's the John Belushi movie
Oh,
that he made 3 movies into his career, and it was a bomb.
well,
Not no pun intended.
well, I mean, if it's got John Belushi, it's got to be number one. I mean,
You think so?
oh yeah.
Yeah. Hook. We talked about the Indiana Jones movies that sort of associate with him. War Horse.
I liked that.
You liked War Horse?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I liked it.
So the final verdict on Versus, as we wrap up this edition of Coco and Daltz, because we never know when we're going to do one. The final verdict was popcorn wins, Oscar movies, good, but not worth celebrating.
Well, I don't
Is
know
that true?
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Okay, tell me.
Well, if you were gauging it by what you said earlier about what's influenced the culture more,
Yes.
then I would say
Popcorn.
Then I would say popcorn flicks.
But in terms of this, for the sake of this argument we're making, popcorn more influential
Yeah.
than Oscar-worthy movies
I would say that.
in the Spielberg
Canon.
oeuvre.
Canon.
Oh, canon.
Canon.
Okay, canon.
Let's go with that word now.
Not oeuvre.
Yeah.
I thought oeuvre was French for eggs.
Oh, maybe.
Or maybe that's oof. That's oof.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
A little bit of bilingualism there. As we close another edition of the Coco and Daltz podcast.
Well, is that your opinion? Like the action?
No, I don't have to give my opinion, do I?
Yes, you
Oh,
do.
I do.
This is Coco and Daltz.
Okay.
Not just Coco getting interviewed.
I tend to agree with you though. Like the movies, the Raiders of the Lost Ark and Jaws was a fantastic. It sort of brought the horror genre into the mainstream in some ways because it was a horror movie. I mean, it was a scary ass movie.
Yeah.
And people went to it in droves.
Right. And people still use that theme music,
Right.
constantly. Like
When the boss is coming down the hall
Right.
and,
and every sporting event you go to, and
Yeah.
your
Very
mom-
influential.
Your mom uses your full name instead of just your first name. Like, it's on.
It's the Jaws
Yeah.
music. Yeah, so I agree. I completely agree with you. You're absolutely right, Coco. And I hope that will make up for any past crimes that I might have committed against you.
Mocking me is not, the way to my heart.
And on that note, thanks for tuning in this week to the podcast. And with any luck, we'll have another one soon.
And with any luck, we'll also have money from sponsors
Yes.
soon.
And with any luck, we'll have a website that you can send notes to and download things to.
Oh, yeah, we got to get on the website then.
Yeah, that's on me. Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.